Caricris is 6 p.m. Time for CBX Business News. The Business News headlines is brought to you by QMX Wealth Management, making more possible. Bond market momentum, Caribbean finance realignments, and a tax U-turn after diplomatic showdown. Hello, welcome to CBX Business News for Monday, June 30, 2025. I'm Yanil Wood. Thanks for joining us. Coming up in the newscast locally, Morgan Stanley's Global Investment Committee says bonds have outperformed stocks so far this year as investors shift strategy amid risks. On the regional front, CAF, the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, expands its regional footprint with First Bahamas Loan, St. Lucia membership, and Trinidad's chairmanship. And over on the global stage, Canada rescinds its contentious digital services tax after a sharp rebuke and trade threats from the United States. Stay tuned as we unpack these stories and more right after our first break.
Nielsen Rose, host of Let's Talk Stocks, reminding you that health is indeed wealth and time is really money. Why not spend a little time with us? Weekday mornings, 9 to 9:30 a.m. for your daily dose of business, economic, and investment insights.
Caribbean Dreams, instant turmeric tea. What you put in is what you get out. What you put in is what you get out. Yeah. Build up your body, boost up your brain. Take on the world now. Say bye-bye pain. Caribbean Dreams, instant turmeric tea. Be good to you. Caribbean Dreams, instant turmeric tea. Distributed by Amalgamated Distributors Limited.
If it were not for the Jamaica Stock Exchange listing, Phosphate Company Limited would not be where it's at today.
FESCO started from 5 shareholders who believe that they could execute a fuel company as good as or as better than any multinational.
Caribbean flavors and fragrances. I have seen that our company has expanded tremendously after being listed.
Our experience so far has translated into additional customers.
Being listed on the stock exchange allows us a certain prestige. It also speaks to accountability and transparency.
Our transparency has allowed us to access credit easier and at better rates.
We have expanded in terms of our customer base, in terms of our suppliers.
All the fears I had about banks, about losing control, you are having them. And I tell you, they were dissipated when I spoke to the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
So if you're a private company thinking about growing your profits, having better access to capital, I really think you should consider listing on the junior or the main market.
You may have fears in listing on the main market or the junior market of the Jamaica Stock Exchange. Whatever those fears are, we can help you to allay them. Give us a call today. Our friendly professional staff will help you through the process. Let us have that conversation. Give us that call.
Go ahead, have that conversation as soon as possible. We did it and we're very happy.
Make that call now.
You will be glad you did.
The local news is brought to you by Derriman Trading, better from the start. Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean flavors and fragrances, tease the senses, and Pulse Investments. Welcome back to CBX Business News. Now for the local news in detail. On the heels of Barita Investments Limited listing the largest combined bond offer for 2025 and the biggest IPO on the Jamaica Stock Exchange last week, global attention is also shifting to bond markets elsewhere. Morgan Stanley's Global Investment Committee is now signaling a noteworthy shift in market performance, revealing that year-to-date, bonds are outperforming stocks in the United States. In her latest weekly report titled Hold On Loosely, Morgan Stanley's Chief Investment Officer Lisa Chalet emphasized that despite investor focus on the resilience of the U.S. stock market, the real story lies in fixed income gains. According to the report 2 Fridays ago, the S&P 500 was up just 1.5% year-to-date, while U.S. Treasuries posted a total return of 2.8%. Investment-grade bonds rose 2.9%, and high-yield bonds surged 3.4%. These total returns reflect both interest payments and any capital gains or losses. The firm also noted that this bond market outperformance is particularly striking given the backdrop of macroeconomic headwinds, including the Federal Reserve's pause on rate cuts, persistent inflation concerns, and mounting U.S. debt levels. Yet, Morgan Stanley believes the bond rally has room to run, offering 3 key reasons: attractive yields, where bonds are currently priced to deliver positive real returns; supportive policy outlook, where shifting monetary policy and potential deregulation could favor shorter and intermediate-term bonds; and diversification benefits, which show that while long-term bond and stock returns are increasingly correlated, Morgan Stanley's analysis highlights that 2-year bonds still move inversely to equities. Tax Administration Jamaica TAJ is moving to digitize another core function, this time the process for disputing tax assessments. Starting tomorrow, Tuesday, July 1, taxpayers will be required to file objections to notices of assessment online only through their e-services account on the TAJ website. Speaking with CBX News earlier today, Chief Corporate Communications Officer at TAJ, Maris Horton, says the online submission requirement is being implemented to improve efficiency.
Will make the system more efficient in that we'll be getting the objection notices earlier, and our team members will be able to then process these objections quicker. And that would mean that there would be a quicker turnaround time for resolution of objections. So we're just encouraging persons to file any objection that they have, and they reserve the right to object to an assessment that they would have received from the tax authority, and that they need to do that within 30 days. That has not changed. That is to be done within 30 days. What has changed is the mechanism through which they would do that objection, that they will now need to do that online using the Jamaica Tax website, which is www.jamaicatax.gov.jm.
Chief Corporate Communications Officer at TAJ, Maris Horton. Meanwhile, TAJ is reminding taxpayers that an objection must clearly state the specific grounds on which it is being made. Supporting documentation or evidence to substantiate the claim must also be provided if requested. Objections can be filed for any tax type that provides for an assessment, including but not limited to corporate and individual income tax, General Consumption Tax GCT, Special Consumption Tax SCT, and Asset Tax. In other news, financial literacy must begin in childhood if Jamaicans are to build sustainable wealth. That's the view of Barita Foundation's Executive Director, Tankita Chance Wilson, who believes introducing money management skills from a young age is critical to creating a financially empowered population. She was speaking this morning at the 3rd annual JSC Primary and Preparatory Schools Game Award ceremony held at the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
We believe that it is important that in building wealth, that you start from the ground up and that you start with our youngest learners. At the foundation, our focus, our key pillars are education, youth development, entrepreneurship, health and well-being. Now, under our education pillar, we believe financial literacy is a key component to ensuring that we support the overall learning and development of our children. Because at the end of the day, overall health includes not just physical health, but also financial well-being as well.
She also urged students to share the knowledge they've gained with their peers and parents.
One of the things that I always encourage our children to do is when you learn, there's a very popular quote by Maya Angelou that says, when you learn, you must teach. So because you have put the work in and you've learned about investments, I want for you to then teach your friends, okay? And I know on Roblox, you're trading money and you're trading different assets and different materials. So I want you to teach in your conversations. Are you hearing me? I want you to teach your friends about investments. And this summer, make sure you also teach your parents about investments, because we cannot take it for granted that your parents know more about investments than you do. So there's an opportunity for you to teach them something that they don't already know.
Executive Director of Barita Foundation, Tankita Chance Wilson. Meanwhile, Khalif Wright of the Avondale Prep was awarded first place, while Zayden Cunningham of Excelsior Primary was awarded second place for the JSC's Wisdom CRM Virtual Stock Market game. Barita Investments Limited BIL is one of the partners on the virtual stock market game. And still with JSC, but this time trading news for today. 111 stocks traded on the JSC today, of which 54 advanced, 38 declined, and 19 traded firm. Leading the winners were Knutsford Express Services, 138 Student Living Jamaica Variable Preference, Mayberry Group, and AS Bryden & Sons Holdings US dollar. While the losers were led by Caribbean Clean Energy US dollar, First Rock Real Estate Investments US dollar, MFS Capital Partners, and JFP Limited. Now the main index advanced by 4,616.34 points, or 1.48%, to close at 317,312.98. The junior market index also advanced, but by 60.22, or 1.76%, to close at 3,476.21. And it's time for Market Education Feature, brought to you by CariCris, Regional Ratings, Global Standard. And from the stock market to our Market Education Feature, where we'll be exploring the term base period. A base period is a specific point in time used as a benchmark for collecting and comparing economic data across different time frames. It allows analysts and decision makers to track changes consistently, particularly in areas like inflation, GDP, which is gross domestic product, and price indexes. You may also hear it referred to as a reference period, basis period, or index period. For example, if a price index uses 1990 as the base year, then prices in all other years are compared to those in 1990. That year would typically be assigned an index value of 100. Prices in subsequent years are then expressed as a percentage of the 1990 level, showing whether prices have risen or fallen in relation to that baseline. The market education feature was brought to you by CARICRIS, Regional Ratings, Global Standards. And that's it for market education feature and the end of the local segment. Please stay with us. The regional business news is up next. The local news is brought to you by Derriman Trading, better from the start. Development Bank of Jamaica, facilitating economic growth and development. Caribbean Flavors and Fragrances, tease the senses. And Pulse Investments. Welcome back, and now for the regional business news. In a series of historic developments, the Caribbean region has strengthened its financial and institutional integration with the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, CAF. At the bank's recent Board of Directors meeting held in Seville, Spain, the Bahamas secured a landmark US $100 million sovereign loan, the first such facility since completing its incorporation in late 2024. The loan will drive energy sector reforms aligned with the Bahamas' national energy policy, targeting modernization of the electricity grid, increased renewable energy adoption, and greater climate resilience for island communities. Meanwhile, St. Lucia was approved to join CAF as a Series C shareholder, unlocking access to development financing and technical assistance. Once the incorporation process is finalized, St. Lucia will become the latest Eastern Caribbean state to tap into CAF's resources. Now, Antigua and Barbuda, a recent CAF entrant, has already moved to increase its shareholding. The boost in Series C shares expands the country's financing envelope, allowing for deeper investment in national infrastructure and social development priorities. And Trinidad and Tobago also reached a historic milestone by chairing CAF's Board of Directors meeting for the first time. As the only full Series A shareholder from the English-speaking Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago assumed the rotating chairmanship in March this year. In the meantime, CAF also announced plans to open a regional office in Barbados later this year, which will serve as a hub for technical and financial support across the Eastern Caribbean. And the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, CAF, has approved a record US $5.4 billion in development financing for the region. The funds will support a diverse slate of development operations across Latin America and the Caribbean, ranging from energy sector reforms and green energy transition to SME development, railway infrastructure expansion, agriculture, and sustainable urban growth. CAF Executive President Sergio Diaz Granados says the approval reflects a deepening partnership with the region and a strengthened commitment to delivering agile and flexible support, especially for small island developing states, SIDS, in the Caribbean. According to Diaz Granados, they will deliver on their commitment and accompany their Caribbean shareholders on their development pathway to increased resilience and more inclusive, sustainable growth. CAF's broadened financing effort underscores its growing role as a key multilateral partner in the region, especially at a time when countries are grappling with climate vulnerabilities, infrastructure gaps, and economic recovery post-COVID. We move now to troubling news coming from Belize's sugar industry. The sector is grappling with one of its worst performing seasons in decades, with total cane deliveries falling to around 883,000 metric tons, well below the 900,000 mark and among the three lowest crops on record. Speaking during a recent media briefing, Director of Finance for Belize Sugar Industries, Sean Chavaria, says compounded by the lowest tons of cane to tons of sugar ratio since 2010, persistent labor shortages, adverse weather, and pest infestations, the challenges also resulted in over 100 hours of milling time lost.
The total cane received is just under 884,000 metric tons of cane. That's a low for us. The previous low was in the 2020 crop when we had the impacts of the severe drought from 2019, where we had milled just slightly under 900,000 metric tons of cane. So for us, it's not a very good crop, and what has compounded it is the lower quality of cane that we received this year. Our TCTS, we're still going to be liquidating the factory in the coming days, but our TCTS will end up somewhere around 11.1, 11.2, which is one of the lowest we've seen since the 2010 crop.
The BSA Finance Director also revealed that sugar production for the season is expected to fall just below 79,000 metric tons, marking a near 40-year low.
Total sugar production is estimated after liquidation to be somewhere around just under 79,000 metric tons of sugar cane. That's certainly one of the lowest we've had in the past 35 to 40 years. The previous low was in 2008 when we had produced just over 79,000 metric tons. So we'll be below that figure.
Director of Finance for Belize Sugar Industries, Sean Chavaria. Now to trading news from the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. 23 securities traded on the TTSE Monday, of which 5 advanced, 9 declined, and 9 traded firm. Leading the winners were Unilever Caribbean, Scotiabank TNT, Massey Holdings, and Angostura Holdings, while the losers were led by Trinidad Cement, Calypso Macro Index Fund, Grace Kennedy, and Ansa Merchant Bank. Other results of the day include the All TNT Index declining by 0.41 to close at 1,505.69. The Composite Index declining by 1.48 to close at 1,027.85. And the Cross-Listed Index also declined, but by 0.37 to close at 72.31. And still at 91.81 is the SME Index. And we go for a short break, but please stay with us. The international news segment with Nielsen Rose is up next.
Let's all get fit. This summer set drip. Hip dips and split. Power in the mind, let's get healthy with it. Sometimes the body's so hard, but the body wants it. And then your head is so home, and it's so like this. So we gotta go 1, 2, 3. One more now. 1, 2, 3. Let's go. One more now. 1, 2, 3. One more now. 1, 2, 3, go.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. In the international news today, In a dramatic turn of events, the Canadian government has announced it will rescind its controversial Digital Services Tax (DST) just hours before the first payments were set to be collected. The decision follows a sharp rebuke from U.S. President Donald Trump, who abruptly terminated all trade negotiations with Canada over the weekend, citing the tax as egregious. The 3% levy, aimed at large tech companies generating revenue from Canadian users, was originally introduced to address what Ottawa described as a taxation gap in the digital economy. The tax would have applied to both domestic and foreign firms, including U.S. tech giants like Google, Amazon, and Meta. President Trump's response was swift and uncompromising. In a social media post late Sunday, he declared, "Because of the egregious tax, we are hereby terminating all discussions on trade with Canada, effective immediately." Facing mounting pressure and the risk of a broader economic fallout, the Prime Minister Mark Carney's administration announced late Sunday that it would halt the implementation of the DST and introduce legislation to formally repeal the Digital Services Tax Act. Finance Minister Francois Philippe Champagne confirmed that no collections would be made starting Monday as originally planned. Inflation trends in two of Eurozone's largest economies diverged in June, with Italy seeing a slight uptick while Germany experienced a modest slowdown, according to preliminary data released on Monday. Italy's annual consumer price inflation rose to 1.7% from 1.6% in May, aligning with market expectations. The increase was driven by higher prices to both non-processed 4.2% and processed food at 3%, as well as transportation services 2.9%. Core inflation, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, climbed to 2.1% from 1.9%, signaling persistent underlying price pressures. Monthly inflation stood at 0.2%. In contrast, Germany's inflation rate eased to 2%, down from 2.1% in May and below the anticipated 2.2%. This marks the lowest level since October 2024 and brings inflation back in line with the European Central Bank's 2% target. The decline was largely due to a slowdown in food inflation at 2% and continued drop in energy prices, down 3.5%. Core inflation in Germany dipped to 2.7%, its lowest in 3 months, while monthly prices remained flat. The contrasting inflation paths highlight the complexity of the ECB's task in calibrating monetary policy across a diverse economic bloc. Net mortgage approvals for house purchases in the UK rose sharply to 63,032 in May, up from the revised 60,556 in April and significantly above market forecasts of 59,750. The stronger than expected increase points to a robust recovery in the housing market following the end of a home buyer tax break in April. Remortgaging activity also picked up, with approvals for borrowers switching lenders jumping by 6,200 to 41,500, the largest monthly gain since February 2024. On the interest rate front, the effective rate on the newly drawn mortgages edged down slightly to 4.47% from 4.49% in April, while the rate on outstanding mortgage balances ticked up marginally to 3.87% from 3.86%. The data suggests renewed momentum in the housing sector, supported by easing borrowing costs and resilient demand. West Texas Intermediate WTI crude oil prices slipped to around $64.98 per barrel on Monday, extending last week's steep losses amid easing geopolitical tensions and expectations of increased supply from OPEC+. Crude prices plunged over 11% last week, their sharpest weekly drop since March 2023, as fragile truce between Israel and Iran continue to hold, easing fears of a broader regional conflict that could disrupt oil flows. Despite the calm, Iran has expressed skepticism about the longevity of the U.S. brokered ceasefire and warned of retaliation if hostilities resume. Adding to the downward pressure, reports suggest that OPEC Plus is preparing to raise oil production by 411,000 barrels per day in August, following a similar increase already scheduled for July. Investors are also closely watching trade developments, with a July 9 deadline looming for the Trump administration to finalize key trade agreements, an event that could influence broader market sentiment. And those were your international business stories. After the break, join Neil for your recap.
Welcome back, and now the recap of our top stories. Locally, Morgan Stanley's Global Investment Committee says bonds have outperformed stocks so far this year. Regionally, CAF expands its Caribbean footprint with First Bahamas loan, St. Lucia's membership, and Trinidad's chairmanship. And on the international scene, Canada rescinds its contentious digital services tax after U.S. threatens trade retaliation. Those were the stories making today's CBX Evening News. On behalf of Nielsen Rose and the entire production team, I'm Neil Wood, thanking you for watching CBX, your region, your business, your source.